Welcome back to the Vital Living Forum. Today we are talking about an aging in place movement that looks at how homes can be modified to better meet the needs of frail elders. And with me are Carolyn Saitong of Home for Life Design and Kim Albritton of Focus Design Services. Now, in this segment, we'll begin to look at the aging in place assessment and some of the modifications that can be done to make a home more accessible. Let's get started. Carolyn, I am a type A person. I want a checklist. So is there a checklist, or what should I have on a checklist to tell me if my home is appropriate?
Well, what I usually tell my clients to do is to basically just go through your daily routine and write down some of the things that are difficult for you to do. Are you having trouble in the bathroom? Are you having trouble when you're making your meals? And just kind of make a note of that. One of the areas you want to make sure you look at is the entryway, the bedroom, the bathroom, and the kitchen. And when you're going through your life tasks in those areas, make a note of what you're having difficulty doing. Is it reaching into a shelf? Is it getting on and off the toilet? Is it stepping into your shower? And that's kind of your personal checklist that's tailored to your needs and priorities.
Okay. Now, Kim, in doing an assessment, I know I've heard you refer to the term functional ability. And what are we talking about here with assessment?
Well, it's really very similar to what Carolyn was just speaking to. When I go into a home, I do an informal interview with the client, and I begin by asking them, what are you finding it harder to do in your home than you used to? Are there things that you're having trouble with? It's the same thing. You phrase it in a way where it sort of shifts the blame to the home, so that people don't become defensive about their diminishing abilities, but rather see a problem with the home instead. And so it's really just a creative way of asking people, what are you having trouble with? The same thing that Carolyn does. We probably just use a little bit different terminology maybe when we're speaking, because she comes more from the medical side and I come more from the design side, but we're both trying to accomplish the same thing.
Well, speaking of medical side, Carolyn, what are some of the common aging ailments that make living in your home a little more difficult?
Well, we all experience aging ailments as we get older, and some of the common ones that we see are decreased range of motion and strength. You know, you can't reach as high as you used to, you can't reach as low as you used to, and you have difficulty getting off those low seats, and because your strength is diminished. But some of the other common things that we see are low vision. You're more sensitive to glare as you get older, but you also need more lighting when you're doing certain tasks like sewing or writing or cooking. And so we have to always address the vision. We sometimes deal with cognitive or memory impairment with the older adults, so we always want to make sure that safety is addressed with those kind of conditions. And then oftentimes we're always addressing depression. It's very common that as you get older and you can't do those things that you used to do, we often see that seniors become depressed or socially isolated. So we really want to focus in on what is the occupations that they're no longer able to do, because we want to get them back to performing those occupations to avoid those feelings of depression and get them engaged in their community and in their home like they were when they were younger.
Well, tying in, again, the interior design, Kim, how can that help as a person is aging, changes in aging in place?
Well, Serena, oftentimes our lack of ability or our perception of aging and ability have to do with our inability to use our physical environment. So when you go in and you have a space that's well designed, it increases your functionality in that space and less attention is drawn to your diminishing abilities. So that's just a long way of saying that when you put in features that are smart, then you use the home much the same way you always have without really noticing that it's not working for you anymore.
Well, one of the aspects I would think with this assessment is determining if the home actually fits the needs of the individual. Do you want to comment on this, Carolyn?
Sure. I think it's important to realize how crucial it is to be working with a healthcare consultant. And occupational therapists kind of possess the skills to be very client-centered and occupation-based, so that when we understand who the client is we're looking at, we're understanding their medical conditions. Do they have arthritis? Have they had a stroke? And then once we understand who they are and what occupations they want to do, we can then look at the environment. And we use assessment tools that help us to specifically note what areas of practice, whether it's bathing or cooking a meal, we analyze that activity and say, what are the barriers in that kitchen or that bathroom that's keeping them from doing that? And when we use standardized assessment tools and use evidence-based practices, we can then offer modification solutions that have been proven to be effective in helping people to continue to live within their environment. So it's important that you have that dialogue with the healthcare consultant, but then also bring in experts like Kim to kind of complement and make that environment as aesthetically pleasing as possible to help the person.
So really, Kim, is what I'm hearing, that you have to create a balance between what functional ability the individual has and what the home has to offer.
Absolutely, yes. I think if you were to look at the way even new homes are being built, they're still being built as if we only lived to 47 years old. And they're built for a 34-year-old man that's average height and able-bodied. Right. And I think, you know, it's criminal, actually. So we are in a cycle of retroactive programming right now, and which means that most of the homes are not going to suit our needs for the long term. And it could be something minor, like changing out the countertops and the hardware in your home. It could be something major where you need a complete renovation of your bathroom. But I think everybody is going to need at some point to assess their home if they own a home right now, because they just aren't being built to the standards of let's say, what we need when we're 85 years old.
And because people are living longer, I mean, you really have to take that into consideration, like whether or not the home is going to support long-term living, because as you live into your 80s, you're most likely going to need a walker or possibly a wheelchair, and the homes today just don't accommodate those kind of devices. So it's important to be thinking long-term.
Well, Carolyn, along that same line, why are kitchens and bathrooms such big ticket items as far as making changes by aging in place?
Well, I think it's very simple. We're always either in the bathroom or in the kitchen, right? Because we have to eat every day and we go to the bathroom more than once. And every time we're in those environments and there's barriers to our function, we're reminded constantly of that inability to step in the shower, that inability to reach into that shelf and get something that we need. So because we're so active in those two rooms throughout the day, we're always reminded of the barriers and of our disability. So when you're in an environment that doesn't work for you, you're constantly reminded, and that also kind of brings in what Kim was talking about how important it is to address those issues so that you never realize that you're 84 and living independently, because everything is so accessible and easy to do.
Well, and because everything is built right now the same way it has been for 50 years, when you have to make those changes, let's say that you do end up with a walker or a chair, or maybe you just are weak and need to sit down to do some of the activities in the kitchen that you used to stand and do, or you can't lift that heavy pot and move it anymore. These are not inexpensive changes. When you have to start pulling out cabinetry and replacing it with a more accessible design, it's not inexpensive. So speaking to the big ticket issue, it usually takes major renovation to make these rooms work.
Well, let's just start with the kitchen. And I do better if I can see things. And I believe you have some pictures of a kitchen. And so let's look at the kitchen. And what are some of the design problems that you are seeing here with this kitchen?
Well, one of the things that we like to do as therapists is look at how somebody performs a task. And here we have a picture of a woman who is sitting in a wheelchair or a scooter, and she's trying to do the dishes. And you can clearly see that there are barriers there. She's taking on a position or a posture that doesn't allow her to do that comfortably because she doesn't have access to a roll-in sink. So once we see somebody actually utilizing the environment, we clearly see here the barriers to being able to do that safely and with ease. So it's important to look at things like this to be able to identify what barriers there are.
Okay, let's see if there's another. Now, what are some of the problems that you see here?
Kim, did you
Well,
want
this
to
is
comment?
clearly a reach issue. As we get older, our flexibility decreases. We spoke earlier, you and I, about our height decreasing. You know, there are a lot of things that change, and this is clearly an issue with the reach aspect of the cabinetry. They become unusable.
And some of the other things that you note in this picture is there's not any lighting underneath the cabinet, and you need more light when you're standing at your counter and you're cooking or when you're preparing your food. It's important to have task lighting underneath the cabinet, so that's another issue that can be brought up. Or if you have light that's behind you, like on your ceiling and you're leaning over to cook, there's a shadow that's casted there. So it's important to really consider task lighting and increased lighting in areas where you do a lot of your meal preparation.
Well, and especially in this particular photo, there's no difference between the countertop and the backsplash. It's all one material. So without the additional lighting, you can't really see the difference in the surfaces there. So that's important.
Well, let's see about some good features that one might incorporate in a kitchen.
Well, here in the top left corner, you can see that that area over the stove is clearly lit. There's increased lighting there, so you're able to see the stove top better. The dials are a white color, whereas the cooking surface is black. So it's a clear identifier of where you need to be putting your hands to avoid any kind of burning.
Also, if you'll notice, the area underneath the stovetop is clear. So that somebody in a chair can wheel up under there. And because the knobs for the stovetop are located on the front, they can easily see what they're doing. If they were located along the side, then the furthest away would be inaccessible to them.
Oh, very good. Okay, let's see another.
In the bottom photo, too, you can see that the dishwasher has been slightly elevated off the ground, and what this allows is access to somebody who's in a wheelchair, so they don't have to bend over as far to empty the dishwasher. So simply raising appliances can make a huge difference for people that are sitting all the time.
You know, Carolyn, I wanted to say this because oftentimes when we talk about aging in place design, there are a lot of terms that are synonymous with that, such as universal design. And I think this is a good example of how aging in place, universal design is good for a number of people in the household. And let's say, you know, my husband's very tall. And so if the dishwasher is elevated off the floor, and I have a good husband, he loads the dishwasher sometimes, it makes it easier for him to access even. So it's not
win-win for everyone.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think this is a good example of just a good design principle that would work for a number of different reasons.
Well, let's go and see another.
Here, what we like to point out is it's important to have counter space that's right near your appliances. So if you're preparing a lasagna, you can have everything right there at your counter and easily transfer it into the oven, as opposed to having a workspace where you have to then carry the lasagna or whatever you're cooking to a different area of the kitchen. So having everything close by is very important when you're thinking about how your kitchen should be laid out. Also, appliances are very important, and here we see the appliance that opens like a door instead of the traditional pull down. So it allows you to access it much easier.
Right, you can get much closer with it with an appliance that opens to the side like that.
All right, let's move on now to bathrooms. And when we move on to bathrooms, we know that they are a very big concern. Why are bathrooms such a big concern, Carolyn?
I think it's really important to always remember how much time you spend in the bathroom, and that's why it's an area that we need to focus on when we're looking at aging in place, and one of the areas that we need to address. And here clearly you can see that there's space in this bathroom, but there are a lot of modifications that can be done to make it easier. When I was participating in this home safety assessment, the individual was using the sink to help get on and off the toilet, and it was becoming a little loose because after wear and tear it's just not meant to do that. So we want to again see how they utilize the bathroom area and offer suggestions for what we can do to modify it to make it safer.
Well, let's see what maybe some good design features might be for a bathroom.
Here you can clearly see that there is a roll-in shower. We really like to go ahead and eliminate that step altogether because it just allows easy access to either walk in, but then you're thinking long-term, because if you ever need a wheelchair or a wheeled shower chair, you clearly have access to be able to utilize that shower area, avoiding any kind of step.
You also see the integration of a seat in both of those pictures, which is another feature that is attractive to a wide range of people, actually. You know, women could often use a seat in the shower, and it provides an area for rest or support if you need that inside the shower.
And actually right near that seat, Serena, it looks like a towel bar, but it's actually a grab bar.
Oh.
So some people kind of cover up or find other ways to make use of that grab bar by putting a towel there, but it also acts as an assistive device for when you're sitting and then you're going to go to standing, you have something to hold on to.
Now, you mentioned how you had seen someone actually use a sink to try to get up off the toilet.
Yes.
Let's see if there is an example of something that can be done, a modification that shows how that can be improved.
One of the things that you could do here is, I think this is a newer toilet, so it's a little bit higher. Most standard toilets are about 15 inches off the ground, and I'm sure Kim and I both prefer the comfort height toilets, which are about 17 to 19 inches, and they're a lot higher.
And let's see if there is still something else that can be done.
This is what we call a 3-in-1 commode, where we actually put handrails on the commode to make it easier, and this is kind of a cheaper way to make your toilet a little bit higher. But there's also a great product called a toilevator, where you actually put a higher base right underneath the toilet to raise it up about 4 inches, and that can make a huge difference for somebody with hip pain.
Thank you very much, ladies. And I think we are seeing that these modifications that can be done in the kitchen and bathroom are amazing. They will make a world of difference. And we can see how some simple changes and even larger remodels can help elders age in place. But it's time for us to take another break. But when we get back, we're going to be looking at still other modifications that can be made around the home. Welcome back. In this third and final segment of our Vital Living Forum, Carolyn Saitong and Kim Albritton will walk us through more changes that you can make to age in place successfully. And I'm going to suggest that we start at the front door. So, Carolyn, let's start at the front door. And what are some of the barriers that you see with this front door?
Well, this is very common because most homes have at least one step to get into them. And clearly we see that this house has 3 steps, but there's no rail to support you. So when you're walking up, most people are probably going to grab onto the door frame, which isn't very safe to do. Kim, did you want to add
Also,
something?
yes, the doorknob presents a problem for people with dexterity issues. It's difficult to grab the old-fashioned round knobs and turn them if you don't have a lot of strength in your hand. And additionally, there is not enough contrast between the numbers that are on the house and the color of the paint of the house. And as Carolyn mentioned earlier to me, we were talking about the approach of emergency vehicles. If that becomes necessary, it's going to be difficult for them to spot the numbers from the street, especially in a dark scenario.
Okay. Well, what about another example of an entryway?
Well, here we see again the steps without any kind of railing. Also, the light isn't anywhere near the door. So at night, you go in there and you try to unlock your door, and you might have trouble seeing that actual doorknob or the keyhole. So you want to make sure that the light is placed somewhere near the door. Also, we see that the mailbox is right outside of this front door, and if you're having trouble with steps, you have to find an alternate way to get all the way to your mailbox. So it's important to think about those practical things. Where should my mailbox be located? Where should lighting be located? And what kind of knobs are on my door? I want to be able to access my door very easily.
Well, let's go now to some good entryways. Why is this considered good?
Well, here we can see that there's a very low threshold in front of the front door. This is pretty standard for homes, newly built homes here in the state of Florida, about a 4-inch threshold. Now, that still would present a problem if you were in a wheelchair. But with a walker, it's manageable. And there are things such as a ramp that you can actually attach to thresholds like that to aid you if you needed for a chair. But all things considered, it's a better entryway. There is a level surface from the driveway through the walkway and up to the front door.
And it's really important, too, to have your entryway covered. Because in Florida, it rains, almost every day around the same time, and you want to make sure that you are in a safe place while you're trying to unlock your door. And sometimes we recommend having a stool or a bench or something outside the front door so that you can put your groceries down or put your purse down while you unlock your door and make your way inside.
Well, let's see another entryway.
Well, this is clearly a modification to a home where somebody has had the need for a ramp, and so one has been built onto the front. And you'll see that there are rails that extend on either side of it. So if it were a situation where somebody was not necessarily in a chair but had balance issues, this would be a support for them.
And you can see clearly that this is even though there's a ramp there, it's a very inviting porch. I mean, there's chairs there, there's planters, so it makes you kind of want to go and sit down and visit with that person. So,
which is important.
Right. So ramps don't always have to be something that's not attractive. There are wonderful ways that you can incorporate ramps and being able to access the front porch and make it look good.
Well, you can see that they've taken the rail to the ramp and integrated it with the rail that surrounds the porch to make it cohesive in design.
Decor and so forth. Now, you mentioned something about doorknobs, and Kim, I know that door handles are often something that individuals can change themselves in their homes. Now, comment on this doorknob.
Well, in the top picture, we see the standard round doorknobs that were previously used in most homes. We don't see them quite as often as we used to. Now you more often see the lever handles, which are much easier to use for people with limited motion or limited strength.
And what we try to do is get people to go around their house and use a closed fist. We call it the closed fist test. And if you're able to open the door or open a cabinet or turn on a faucet with a closed fist, the chances are you'll be able to use that for the long term.
Oh, that's a good thing to try. Well, let's skip ahead to hallways and door frames. Carolyn, do you want to comment on this?
Well, this is just an example of just beautiful access. It's spacious, it's open, and this would clearly work in somebody who has a family, or it would clearly work for somebody who has grandma or grandpa living with them. Why? Because the hallways are nice and wide, and grandma and grandpa would have access to that kitchen area. They would be able to sit down and be able to get a walker or wheelchair and use that flooring.
Kim, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Well, what I think is really nice about this particular entryway is the natural light that's coming in through the doorway. I think we don't realize what an impact the use of natural light in our home has on our emotional well-being. And so when we talk about good lighting, it's really important to integrate natural light into that.
Well, let's see. Are there any ideas for the bedroom? Carolyn?
Well, right, we want to make sure that the bedroom is organized in a way that works for the individual. So if you have somebody that gets up frequently at night to use the bathroom, you want to position the bed in such a way that the person can get up and safely walk to their bathroom without having to walk around the bedroom or walk around the bed. You also would like a phone nearby, a light that they can turn on as soon as they get up. It's just a really good way to arrange your bedroom so that it works for you and whatever you need to use the bedroom for.
I agree.
Okay. What about closets? That looks
I'm
like
embarrassed to say this looks a lot like my closet, actually.
What's important about closets is that you want to make sure that you can access them. People like to put all kinds of things and everywhere, wherever it will fit in their closet.
Oh,
and
yes.
it's important to know that you don't have to have your closet rod at the height that it may be at right now. You can lower it. You can get different kinds of shelving like we see in this picture to have clothing at different parts, at different heights of your closet. So maybe the things that are not in season you put up higher, and the ones that you're frequently wearing you put at a level where you have access to them.
There also are shelves that you can pull down. They can stay at one level out of the way when you're not using them, and then you can pull them down when you need to access them.
And they also make these hangers that have long necks. They actually make them for children so that children can have access to them, but they're a long neck and have a hook so that it hooks up here, but the clothes are actually down here. So it's just another inexpensive way to have access to your clothing in your closet.
Very good. Oh, you've given me some ideas because I certainly need to do something about my closet. Now, let's talk about floor coverings, and because that often is a problem as we make transitions from room to room. Comment on what we're seeing here.
Well, area rugs are almost always a bad idea. Even with the non-slip pads that most people put underneath them, they create just enough change in elevation when people are walking that it becomes a tripping hazard. Whether you just have a tendency to shuffle your feet when you walk, and I think everybody does occasionally, or you are using some sort of device to assist with your mobility, it can become a hazard in the home.
Yeah. Now, do you ladies make any recommendations about a floor covering, whether you think it's preferable to have carpet or tile or hardwood?
Well, I think it's a lot of it is a matter of preference, but I will say that if you take a fall on a tile floor, it's probably going to cause a lot more damage than it would if you took a fall on carpet. That being said, if you are going to choose a carpet for your floor covering, it should be a low pile carpet, nothing plush, because once again, the thicker, or if it's not a loop pile where the thread makes a complete loop, it can cause a hazard to you as far as mobility goes.
We have been looking at single-story houses. So what about a two-story home?
Well, what's fortunate about living in Florida is that we don't really have to deal with this issue too much. But an easy way to kind of avoid having to go up and down your stairs if you're aging in place is to try to create a bedroom area on your first floor. And oftentimes you can do that. You can set up your living room to be a temporary or a permanent bedroom. But oftentimes you don't have a full bath on the first floor. So you can integrate something like stair lifts to help you have access to the second floor, or some people actually install elevators into their home to allow them to have access to their second story.
Very good. Kim, you have mentioned lighting several times. You mentioned how important natural lighting is. How can lighting make a real difference to aging in place?
Serena, I think if I were going to make one suggestion to somebody that was trying to implement some of these strategies that we talked about today, it would be to modify their lighting, because our eyes are probably the number one thing that you'll find people complain about as they age. Everybody has some issue, whether it's just the normal degradation or something more serious like cataracts or glaucoma, but everybody's going to contend with it. So it's really important that we have task lighting, and the images that we're seeing here, you see in the kitchen with all the lights on, it looks like an awful lot at one time. But the point is that all of these lights operate on a different switch so that you can use only what you need. Also, I would suggest that many of these lights be put on a dimmer. And the reason I would suggest that is just because maybe I need brighter light to cut the vegetables to cook. I have a very dear friend who's very light sensitive, and so she actually needs to turn down the lighting in her home to be comfortable, and it saves on energy when you put it on a dimmer.
Oh, that's a very good point.
Plus, it makes it much more friendly for people to adapt it to their needs. But task lighting is really important in the home because you need additional lighting just to navigate safely as you get older.
Well, something that we do need to do in our home is wash clothes. Do you have any ideas about washers and dryers?
Well,
Carolyn?
some of the front load washers that are becoming very popular now are very good to use because laundry is just something that I think none of us like to do, and we're always looking for a way to make it easier, and so I think they developed these front load washers to in fact serve that purpose. So what's great about the front load washers is that they allow you to sit and conserve energy while you're doing your laundry. But we've also seen people actually take their washer and dryer and put them on a higher surface so that they have access to them.
I'd like to say this, though. When it comes to these front-load washers and dryers, be sure that when you're shopping for them that you find one where the controls are actually located on the face of the appliance.
Right.
Because for some strange reason, some of the manufacturers are putting the controls on the top of the appliance. And that's not going to be very effective for you if you find yourself sitting in a position to try to use it.
Right.
So,
And reach the controllers.
Right. And for me, even standing right now, I can't see the top of them if they're elevated.